Imagine standing on the edge of a cliff, the wind tearing at your cloak, the waves below roaring like ancient beasts, and feeling no fear. Not a flicker, not a shiver. To the average human, this seems impossible. Yet in the heart of ancient Greece, there were men who claimed fear was not a law of nature, but a habit of the mind, one that could be mastered, controlled, and ultimately conquered. These men were philosophers, yes, but not the ones whose names appear in schoolbooks. These were seekers of a hidden path, followers of an obscure tradition that promised something extraordinary, fearless living. They whispered in the crowded agoras of Athens, in the quiet courtyards of Corinth, and even in the secret chambers beneath Delphi, that ordinary life shackled the human soul with imagined dangers. And they claimed they had found the key to freedom. But what if I told you this knowledge came with cost? Those who pursued it too far sometimes vanished from history without a trace. Or worse, became legends of madness or hubris. The Greeks called this pursuit ataraxia, a state of serene fearlessness. It wasn't about ignoring danger. It was about looking at death, pain, and uncertainty straight in the eye and understanding them in a way most humans never could. The earliest hints of this philosophy appear in the writings of Epicurus, who insisted that fear, particularly fear of death, was the greatest human torment. But long before Epicurus, there were whispers of even older secrets, of mystics and warriors who walked the streets of Athens with a calm that unnerved everyone around them. Picture a young man in 5th century BCE Athens, standing in the shadow of the Parthenon, listening as a teacher speaks. Most men run from shadows of danger, yet fail to see the true enemy is within. These words were more than advice, they were a challenge. They promised liberation from the instinctive chains of fear, a promise so alluring it drew the brightest minds, yet so dangerous it often destroyed them. Fear, the Greeks realized, was not just an emotion. It was a force, powerful, seductive, and invisible. It could dictate the course of wars, topple rulers, and shatter empires. And those who understood it, who could see its roots in desire, ignorance, and imagination, could harness it instead of being crushed by it. This knowledge didn't exist in dusty scrolls or the public forums. It was taught in secret, in whispers, often under the veil of night. Students were tested not with logic puzzles, but with trials designed to confront their deepest fears. Some were thrown into pitch-dark caverns, left alone to wrestle with panic. Others faced mock executions, illusions of death crafted to teach the soul to remain calm. And through it all, a teacher, sometimes called a Philosophus, sometimes a shadowy figure whose name was never recorded, guided them toward one goal, the fearless mind. But not all who tried succeeded. History remembers the stories of those who cracked under pressure, whose minds were overwhelmed by terror and never recovered. Their failures were warnings, etched into the folklore of the city-states, while the successes, rare, silent, almost mythic, were immortalized in cryptic writings that teased at a secret path, yet never revealed it fully. And here lies the mystery. If such fearlessness could be achieved, why did so few attain it? Was it a gift, a discipline, or something darker? Some scholars suggest it was the fruit of a dangerous method, bordering on obsession, a philosophy that demanded the student confront the extremes of human experience, including the very real threat of death, in order to transcend it. Others believe it was an initiation into a secret society of thinkers and warriors whose existence the official histories tried to erase. Tonight, imagine walking the streets of ancient Athens, past the crowded agora, past the theaters filled with debate and drama. Somewhere, a small group gathers, silent, eyes sharp, movements deliberate. They are neither soldiers nor politicians, yet they wield a kind of power that terrifies and mesmerizes alike. Mastery over fear itself. And they're the key to a secret the modern world has almost entirely forgotten. But how did they begin? How did ordinary men, students, merchants, even young soldiers, transform into beings seemingly untouched by terror? The path starts with the mind, but it is guided by rituals, discipline, and a brutal confrontation with reality. And as we'll see, some of their methods were so extreme, even the most devoted disciples sometimes questioned whether the cost of freedom from fear was worth the price. The question now looms: what happens when a human truly stops fearing death? Can a man walk through life untouched by danger, pain, or loss? And what dark truths did the Greeks uncover when they pursued this ideal to its ultimate limit? The journey toward fearlessness in ancient Greece was not taught in the grand lecture halls where rhetoric and politics dominated. It unfolded in hidden corners, quiet gardens, shadowed courtyards, and sometimes in caves carved into the hills surrounding Athens and Delphi. Here, a select few disciples were initiated into practices that blurred the line between philosophy and something far more visceral. The process began with observation, an almost surgical examination of fear itself. Students were taught to watch their thoughts, tracing every heartbeat of anxiety back to its source. Why does the mind panic at the sight of a shadow? Why does the heart pound when death is near, even if only imagined? The Greeks believed these reactions were not natural, but learned. And if they could be unlearned, the mind could achieve ataraxia, a state of serene, fearless clarity. One teacher, known only as Damon, is said to have instructed his students with a simple, terrifying exercise. He would lead them to the edge of cliffs overlooking the Aegean Sea, blindfolded, and whisper, "The abyss is nothing. It is your mind that screams. Conquer it, and you are free." Some fled in terror. Others stood still for hours, listening to the wind, feeling the rock beneath their feet, until the panic faded. The mind, when faced with its own illusions, could either crumble or awaken. But observation alone was not enough. The Greeks combined philosophy with ritualized exposure to danger. Initiates would face illusions of death, mock hangings, staged shipwrecks, even encounters with wild animals in controlled conditions. These experiences were designed to strip away instinctual fear, to teach the body and mind that panic was optional. And when the students returned to the ordinary world, they carried a confidence that seemed unnatural, almost supernatural, to those around them. Some historians suggest that these teachings were not merely psychological exercises. They were a preparation for something deeper, a confrontation with the divine and the unknown. The Stoics, for instance, preached that fear arises from attachment, fear of death, of pain, of loss. By detaching from outcomes, by training the mind to remain calm in all circumstances, one could live boldly and freely, even in the midst of chaos. Yet there was a darker side to this pursuit. Stories tell of students who, in seeking ultimate fearlessness, crossed into recklessness or hubris. A young soldier named Leontius reportedly underwent an extreme test. Thrown into a pit with snakes, he emerged unharmed, but forever changed. His eyes, some claimed, no longer reflected human emotion. He walked among men, yet seemed part of another realm, untouched by terror, untouched by empathy. The Greeks whispered that to master fear entirely, one had to risk losing a part of one's humanity. At the same time, this fearlessness had practical power. Warriors trained in these methods became unmatched in battle. Leaders who embraced these teachings navigated political treachery with an almost preternatural calm. Even merchants and artisans reported that understanding fear allowed them to negotiate, to innovate, and to survive in ways that others could not. Fear, once tamed, became a tool rather than a curse. There are hints that some of these secret teachings were recorded carefully and sparsely in scrolls now lost to history. References appear in the works of Plutarch and Cicero, where they discuss men who displayed extraordinary courage, whose fearlessness seemed almost magical. Yet the true methods, those shadowed rituals, the exercises in confronting death itself, were deliberately obscured. Perhaps the Greeks feared that in the wrong hands, such power could corrupt or destroy. Even among philosophers, the approach was controversial. Epicurus argued that the highest pleasure came from peace of mind and the absence of fear, particularly the fear of death. Stoics, like Zeno and later Seneca, insisted that training the mind through adversity created strength, courage, and virtue. But few dared to combine the psychological, physical, and mystical exercises that truly produced the fearless state. And here's the paradox. The closer one got to mastering fear, the more isolated one became. Ordinary humans, still bound by instinct, looked upon these initiates with suspicion, awe, or envy. The fearless seemed alien, even unsettling. Some legends say that disciples who fully embraced this path disappeared entirely, leaving behind only whispers and cautionary tales. Did they ascend to a higher understanding, or were they destroyed by the very fears they sought to master? The streets of Athens hid many such stories. A man could walk past a philosopher in the agora, listening to the debates, unaware that this seemingly ordinary citizen had once stared into the abyss and emerged unshaken, untouched by terror. And yet, for every story of triumph, there were dozens of failures, men and women whose minds broke under the weight of their own courage. Tonight, as the city slept under the dim glow of oil lamps, secret gatherings continued. Teachers like Damon whispered lessons in fearlessness to a new generation, testing, observing, and pushing boundaries. And somewhere, a student was about to face a trial that would either free him forever or leave him a cautionary ghost in history. Because the truth about fearlessness, the Greeks discovered, is that it is not a gift, it is a crucible. And the world rarely forgives those who emerge from it too strong, too calm, too untouchable. The most enigmatic part of this ancient pursuit was not the theory, it was the ritual. Those who sought fearless living were drawn into trials that tested body, mind, and spirit in ways few could imagine. Unlike modern exercises in courage, these were not symbolic. They were real, tangible confrontations with danger. One such ritual, recorded only in fragmented accounts, involved a journey into the catacombs beneath Athens. Students descended into darkness so complete that even their own hands seemed alien. The air was thick with the scent of damp stone and centuries-old incense. Here, in absolute silence, the disciples faced a profound truth. The mind amplifies fear, but it can also overcome it. A student named Callias was said to have spent 3 days alone in these subterranean passages, encountering his own panic over and over until it lost all power. He emerged with a calm that unnerved even his peers. When asked what he had experienced, he merely said, "I met nothing outside myself, and I was unafraid." But not all trials were contemplative. Some tested physical courage in ways designed to push instinct to its breaking point. Warriors in training would leap into freezing rivers, spar with armed instructors, or face wild animals in carefully controlled arenas. The point was not mere survival, but confrontation, to face instinctual terror repeatedly until the mind and body no longer reacted in panic. And yet, perhaps the most dangerous element was the psychological. Teachers deliberately blurred reality and illusion, creating situations where a student could not trust even his own senses. A staged shipwreck, a mock execution, or a simulated betrayal by a trusted companion forced the disciple to confront the ultimate fear, that the world might be chaotic, cruel, and utterly unpredictable. By surviving these illusions without succumbing to terror, a student trained himself to remain steadfast even in the face of real danger. This was where the secret diverged from philosophy, as most know it. Public teachings, lectures, and texts could inspire courage, but these hidden exercises created a new type of human. Those who endured them could act in moments of crisis with clarity and composure that seemed supernatural. In battle, in politics, in personal conflict, they were untouchable. Not because they were invincible, but because fear no longer dictated their choices. Legends describe a group known as the Ataraxians, followers of this philosophy who moved almost like shadows through the Greek world. They were scholars and soldiers, merchants and spies. Their signature was calm in impossible situations, a fearlessness that allowed them to manipulate events, survive disasters, and sometimes disappear entirely without a trace. Ordinary men might flee in panic, but the Ataraxians advanced with deliberate, unshakable purpose. Yet there was always a risk. Complete mastery of fear could tip into recklessness. A disciple who no longer feared death might take actions that endangered not only himself, but everyone around him. Some historians suggest that certain mysterious disappearances, sudden deaths of brilliant warriors, or unexplained tragedies in Greek cities were the result of experiments in this philosophy gone too far. To confront fear completely was to flirt with forces the mind was never meant to tame fully. Among the few surviving writings, Plutarch hints at this danger. He describes men of singular courage, who feared nothing, yet their eyes held a darkness that startled even the bravest. Such accounts suggest that fearlessness was a double-edged sword. It brought freedom, but also isolation, obsession, and in some cases madness. And yet, the rewards were undeniable. In an era defined by war, political intrigue, and social upheaval, those who achieved this state could act decisively when others faltered. They could negotiate, fight, or survive impossible situations with an almost inhuman clarity. Ordinary citizens whispered about these figures, speculating on whether they were blessed by the gods or cursed by their own mastery. By now, the pattern is clear. Fearlessness was not simply a mindset. It was a transformation of the self, achieved through a brutal regimen of observation, exposure, and confrontation. And the Greeks guarded it jealously, knowing that if the knowledge spread too widely, the delicate balance between courage and chaos could collapse. As the sun rose over Athens, the city's streets teemed with life, but in hidden gardens and darkened chambers, another lesson began. A new disciple was about to face a test that would reveal the ultimate truth, whether human beings could truly live without fear, or whether the mind's instinctive terror is an unbreakable law of nature. The final trial for those seeking true fearlessness was not about courage in the ordinary sense. It was about confronting the inevitability of death itself. The Greeks believed that to live without fear, one had to stare directly at mortality, not as a distant concept, but as an immediate, inescapable reality. This was the ultimate crucible. Disciples were led to isolated locations. Cliffs overlooking the Aegean, forests where predators roamed, or ancient tombs filled with the silence of the dead. There, instructors posed a question far more terrifying than any physical challenge. If death comes for you now, what will remain? It was in these moments that the mind either collapsed or transcended. Students who had mastered exposure, illusion, and pain could approach death with calm detachment. Some accounts describe warriors lying in mock graves, completely at peace, meditating as if the end were already present, and realizing it did not matter. Fear, they discovered, existed only in anticipation. One man, known in legend as Theron, faced a trial that would define the Ataraxians' philosophy. Tied to a stake atop a cliff, with the storm raging around him, he was left to contemplate his mortality while the waves crashed below. Hours passed. Night fell. By dawn, he stood unharmed, serene, utterly fearless. When asked how he felt, he answered simply, "Death is neither enemy nor friend. It is a step I need not fear." Such mastery was intoxicating. Those who attained it moved through the world with an authority and calm that others could not comprehend. Leaders sought their counsel, armies relied on their courage, and even kings trembled in their presence. To the Greeks, this was no mere training. It was the secret of living fully, untethered from panic, anxiety, and hesitation. Yet there was a warning embedded in every lesson. Complete fearlessness came at cost. Those who embraced it entirely risked detachment from ordinary human concerns, love, grief, empathy, because the intensity of their inner calm could alienate them from society. Stories survive of disciples who, though fearless, became distant, almost spectral, figures in their communities. Some vanished entirely, leaving behind only cryptic notes hinting at higher truths they had reached but could not explain to ordinary minds. Philosophers like Epictetus and Seneca later codified fragments of these teachings. They emphasized reason, reflection, and virtue as the path to courage, yet only hints remain of the extreme trials that truly forged fearlessness. Some scholars suggest that these practices were intentionally hidden to prevent misuse. Fearlessness, when detached from wisdom and morality, could be catastrophic. The climax of the Greek secret is not just the absence of fear. It is a profound transformation of perception. Pain becomes tolerable, death becomes neutral, and life is experienced with clarity and intensity. Every moment is vivid, every choice deliberate, because the mind no longer trembles at imagined threats. It is freedom in its rawest, most elemental form. And yet, for all its power, the secret was fragile. Societies fear what they cannot control, and such individuals, capable of transcending panic and instinct, were often feared themselves. Some were co-opted by rulers, others hunted by rivals. The very mastery that granted them freedom also painted a target on their backs. To live without fear in the world of ordinary humans was, paradoxically, to invite danger of an entirely new kind. By the end of their trials, the few who survived were no longer ordinary Greeks. They were something more, or something different. And in their silence, in the hidden gardens and secret chambers where they trained, they preserve a knowledge almost lost to history. The art of fearless living, the ultimate human liberation, and the terrifying price it demanded. The Greeks believed that fear was the chain that bound the human soul. To break it was to step beyond ordinary existence, to glimpse a life lived in pure clarity. Those who achieved this state, whether warrior, philosopher, or mystic, moved through the world as though time itself bent to their will. Danger no longer intimidated them, pain no longer enslaved them, and death became not an end, but a natural event observed without panic or regret. But history leaves only fragments of these men and women. Most were absorbed back into society quietly, their extraordinary calm mistaken for wisdom, stoicism, or eccentricity. Others disappeared entirely, perhaps voluntarily abandoning the ordinary world, or perhaps consumed by the very intensity they had cultivated. Plutarch, in passing, mentions figures who walked without fear, as if the fates themselves paused in their presence. But he offers no explanation of how they achieved such a state. And therein lies the lingering mystery. How did ordinary humans touch immortality through fearlessness? And why did the secret vanish? One surviving thread is the Stoic insistence that preparation is key. Anticipate every misfortune, practice virtue relentlessly, and confront the inevitability of death daily. Yet the Ataraxians went further, embracing extremes, testing body and mind in ways ordinary philosophy never demanded. Their goal was not mere courage, but liberation from the tyranny of instinct itself. Imagine standing in the shadow of the Acropolis, centuries later, knowing that somewhere in its history, a human mind transcended fear entirely. Consider a soldier, a traitor, or a thinker who, when faced with death, betrayal, or chaos, acted with a calm so absolute it seemed unnatural. Their secret was not hidden in scrolls or lectures. It was lived, trial by trial, moment by moment, until fear lost all meaning. And now, reflect on yourself. How much of your life is ruled by fear? How often do imagined threats dictate your choices? And how rarely do you confront them directly? The Greeks understood that fear could be tamed, that courage could be cultivated as a discipline, a practice, a way of living that transformed the ordinary into the extraordinary. Perhaps the greatest lesson is this: the potential for fearlessness lies within each human mind, waiting to be awakened. But the path is neither easy nor safe. It demands discipline, confrontation, and a willingness to face the ultimate truths that most avoid. Those who succeed may never return fully to ordinary society, but they will have glimpsed the profound freedom of living unchained by terror. So, what if the ancient Greeks were right? What if fear is not a natural law, but a habit that can be broken, shaped, and finally mastered? The answer may lie not in history books, but in the courage to test yourself against the unknown, to walk toward the metaphorical cliff and stand unshaken, as the masters of ataraxia once did. The secret of fearless living is waiting, not lost, only forgotten. Will you dare to seek it?